Thank you very much for joining us for our fourth Navigating Solo Table Talk. Tonight's topic is exploring third places, and we have a great panel that's going to be joining us and sharing their experiences with us. Before we actually dive in, I just wanted to share a few ground rules just to make sure everyone has common understanding across the board. So if you are not the one speaking, please have your microphone muted. You are welcome to have your name added in chat or your location next to your name. And you're definitely welcome to drop any questions or comments in the chat as we go along. A reminder that the conversation is designed to be supportive, informative, and solution focused. And to keep it that way, just let's refrain from any solo self-promotion, advertising services, or any kind of commercial links. To make sure we all have shared language, I'm going to share with you my framework for solo aging. So my framework for solo aging is actually a framework. There isn't a definition. For me, it's about older adults having reliable support. And that can be someone who didn't have children, may or may not be married or partnered, lives on their own and or with a partner, or for a lot of different reasons had children, but due to family dynamics, due to unfortunately outliving children, due to the inability or unwillingness to assist, those older adults are navigating aging without an extra layer of support. And so for me, that's the framework I use for the Navigating Solo Network and for solo aging. So for all of you different on the screen, we could all see ourselves in a different place in this framework. But I wanted to make sure everyone had a shared language about it. And then this came up a few times during registration. It was in your registration information, but it's always good to reinforce some information that's available. So third places identified by sociologist Ray Oldenburg are places that are beyond our first place, our home, our place of sanctuary, where we have the most intimate of connections, see people the most frequently, that kind of thing, possibly. Or second place, at the time he coined this phrase, he was talking about a workplace. But I've extrapolated it out for my work with solo agers and older adults to really be somewhere you go consistently. That could be a volunteer thing. That could be a part-time job. It's something that's part of your consistent routine. And then third places are all the places in between that we interact with on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis that really afford us some opportunities to expand our networks, to enhance our connections. That's really the framework for third places. Before our panel, actually, let's talk about who's joining us. So as of, I don't know, half an hour ago, this was an accurate map. It's probably close to accurate. There are 39 states represented, 8 countries represented. There are people all over the country and world who live in urban, suburban, rural, etc. And it's just hopefully neat for you to see that while you may be thinking about solo aging from a singular perspective or possibly another person perspective, there are a lot of people thinking about this. And so coming together and being able to learn from and with each other is a really important piece of the work that I do. As you can see, that's things like finding your people and getting out when it might be difficult for geographic reasons, accessibility reasons, mobility reasons, starting over in new places, finding places that fit for you, enhancing those casual connections to being something where you're able to really be able to start connecting with people on a deeper level, and also thinking about if I'm motivated to bring people together, what are some ways that I can start to think about that? And so those are the themes that really came out. We had 120 comments, and those were really the themes that came as part of it. And now our panelists. I am fortunate that 3 folks throughout the country said yes to being panelists for this conversation. Baron Evans is based in Michigan. He'll share about himself as they go along. Margot Lelich is in Oregon, and Michael Pessman is in Illinois. You'll hear in time what they talk about in terms of their urban experiences or suburban experiences or rural experiences. I have a feeling it will come out as part of the conversation. So, with that, I'm going to stop sharing. Thank you to all of you who are joining us this afternoon or evening, depending on what it is to you. I want to make sure that we also will have some time for questions and answers after about a 40-minute panel conversation. So with that, we're going to get started and really look at everyday routines. That's a good way to start us all off foundationally. So thinking about your everyday routine across these different kinds of geographic settings. So for you, Michael, you live in an urban setting in Illinois, and you have access to a wide array of vibrant urban spots. Are there a few go-to third places at which you've become a regular?
Yes, Eileen, and thank you for having me. I will say that my community garden has been a wonderful place to connect with people. I have several solo ager gardeners that I've connected with. We go to meditation on Tuesday nights at a place right down the street, or we often go out to eat. We live in a certain neighborhood, and so I will see these people around and, for example, grocery shopping. We celebrate birthdays. We become very close. Just one common interest has branched out to many things. There's a lady that I'm friends with. Her name is Jan, and I can always find her at a certain public library because she uses the computer to do editing on her poetry.
You had mentioned the community garden when we spoke initially, and I think that's a fabulous thing, especially in summertime when some of us navigate winter as well. So gardening is a great thing. Now, Baron, you happen to be in Michigan, but you have completed 11 relocations around the US and Europe. So you've been in the quote unquote business of rebuilding your local social network for a long time, right? Are there strategies for you in terms of go-to third places when you're establishing yourself in one of these new communities?
And yes, it's oftentimes things you don't even think about. So for me, it's very unconscious behavior. But when somebody brings you to the floor, like you are doing with us today, oh yeah, now I have to actually identify what this is, and I don't even know what to call it. But I think over the years, for me, what's primarily been the driver is first find and know what my internal passions and joys are, and then be able to, if you will, invent those passions and joys in the new community to which I've now relocated. And so for me, that comes down to basically 3, either arts and culture, mentorship, or community development. And so wherever I might be, whether it would be Kansas City, Missouri, whether it be Helsinki, Finland, that's where I start because the work is going to be what the work is. The other part of the life outside of the work is what I've got to work. So that's where I start. Then I dovetail that, once I begin to identify it, into my field of expertise, which is around change management. And I have a 3-legged stool that I like to refer to as the what, the so what, the now what. The what simply asks, what's the intention? What's the goal of you doing whatever this thing is you think you want to do? The so what is pretty obvious. It's the why. And then the now what is the action steps. So it's taking the passions and then building out the 3-legged stool to actually apply it into my life.
And that model has worked consistently across the various experiences?
It's a recipe I've held to for 40 years, and there's no point changing it now.
I'm a big believer in the fact that why is the critical piece in general in life, and asking the question why is always a good piece as well. So I really like this. So what, right? That I like that part a lot. I saw a lot of people smile. Thank you for that and for sharing that. And I bet people will probably, as in chat right now, it's popping up. Can you repeat that?
So, what's the intent of the goal? So what, which is the why am I doing this in the first place? And then the now what simply is the action steps to go proceed and make it happen. What, so what, now what?
Fantastic. There's no pop quiz at the end, but if there was, that would be on it because it's fabulous. Thank you for that. So, Margot, living in a coastal rural community presents some unique geographic dynamics, which we talked about in our first conversation as well. What do third places look like in smaller rural towns or communities, or a multitude of towns and communities for you as you navigate your daily routine?
I've lived in large urban settings as well as many global health projects. So it actually informs my perspective of what it is to live in a small rural coastal community. In Oregon, we are rural and we also have frontier. So it gets really remote. On the north coast of Oregon, so we border Washington divided by the Columbia River. It's basically Highway 101 that runs to San Francisco, and it's 2 lanes. And so all of these coastal communities are divided between about 8 and 15 miles. And while one would think it's the coast and there's similarities, yes, we all share the ocean. We all share this beautiful landscape. They are distinctly and uniquely different. And while that creates an invitation for people to potentially choose where they want to live, it also poses many challenges because transportation is absolutely key to connecting with people in community. And so, yes, we have I'd say a handful of kind of the community gathering places that you would have in urban settings, but they're obviously much smaller. The populations who participate are much smaller, but some of our communities are very niche-y. So the town that I live in has a very small year-round population. And again, this poses challenges because you have your locals and then you have many people who are here seasonally or have homes, but they're not woven into the fabric of the community. And so in my town, there's like the American Legion, and there's the library group, and there's a theater group, and there's the music group, and there's one church in town. And so that's a very vibrant community for those who feel called to be part of that community. But if you're not part of kind of that niche or that particular identity and interest, it can be very lonely and it can be very isolating. You go further south and it's much more open-hearted and open-minded. So while there are these distinct smaller communities that connect because of specific interests or passions or something they're called to, overall, they have a community center. They have a rainy day village. They have a recreation district. They just built a new pool. Even the primary church in that community is much more, for lack of a better word at the moment, progressive in their sense of welcoming all people under all circumstances, and is also a sanctuary gathering place. And so the whole community is always invited to engage. It's not just you have to pick and choose where you want to go or how you want to connect. And the virtual world is really important because transportation can be very challenging. And in fact, there are increasing barriers to transportation more now than there used to be 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 10 years ago. And the other thing that Barron made me think of is, in my mind, and I think for many people who live in this rural community that has its challenges, it's gloriously beautiful. We have a hospital, We have some clinics, but everything's shrinking because of the current kind of funding climate. To access many services, it's at least 2 hours away, right? So there's a lot of focus in these various communities on what is it to age in place and
Mm.
prepare for end of life if one wants to stay. And so I think of there's home, and I consider Cannon Beach my heart home, even though my work has taken me to different places. I've lived here almost 40 years. But my community is the whole North Coast. The North Coast encompasses 2 counties, and each, again, their towns are distinctly different. So I travel to a particular town depending upon what it is I want to access. And it's my whole community, plus my work serve the whole community. But my heart home is Cannon Beach.
I think it's a beautiful way to put it. And I think you shared with me that some of the transportation has recently been reduced or non existent where it once existed. Thank you for sharing that experience. I think the virtual piece that you mentioned really is relevant to everyone. One case in point, there are 176 of us on this Zoom right now. But two, just the opportunities people seem to be able to explore. And a number of people, as I shared in what some of the feedback was, people have expressed the challenge and the barriers of geography, accessibility, mobility. For any of the three of you, is there a particular virtual resource you came across or know about, or a multitude that have really been beneficial that we can add in chat to resource lists?
I'm doing a bit of a training. We have a conscious aging and community connections group that's been very vibrant for years south of the town I live in, but I connect with them. But one of the things that I find is a challenge is we have this access to the virtual world, right? Through some platforms. Zoom is most familiar to people. But barriers to getting to that are in training and understanding how to use the technology. And I'm actually doing a training on kind of some of the various ways that people can access training. ARP is one of them, cyberseniors.org. There are a number of others that are really great resources to assist individuals who have perhaps mobility or transportation issues, but want to connect virtually to groups and conversation to get more comfortable and more familiar with how to use these various forms of technology. And there's some wonderful tools that are evolving out there through universities, through larger organizations like ARP, like Cyber Seniors, H Plus, and others.
Baron, did you have something you wanted to share?
Well, I was just going to offer that it's ironic that for all the horrors that we lived through with COVID for 2 years, there was one shining light that maybe did emerge from it. And that is
Yes,
this
exactly.
opportunity, which we call the yin and yang of life. The other thing I was going to say, though, to Barbara's point, that I think is a good one, is that what I have found, certainly during the COVID and the 4 years since, is that many of these virtual communities are very, I'm going to call interest specific or passion driven. So one would have to go back to that initial question of what drives me, what inspires me, to then really open up the doors to what virtual communities could bring to them.
Michael?
Yes, Eileen, I work for a place called Mather. It's in Evanston, Illinois, and we create ways for people to age well. And I work specifically on virtual programs where we invite older adults to our skilled facilitators, oftentimes people that have masters of arts in creativity. So we make art pieces. I'd like to share that link. They're free to join if I could in the chat.
Sure,
Okay.
absolutely.
We have a program called Better Balance to help people exercise at home using your chair. We have a meditation, an hour of meditation from a skilled facilitator, and we are self-funded. So we get money from endowment, our Mather Foundation. So that's how we paid to put all of these programs on. But it's a wonderful opportunity. I encourage everyone to check that out. And I will say that the majority of people on our programs are solo agers themselves. So there's a community. there's certain programs that we come together, we can freely talk. They are very well connected. So I can't say enough good things about that.
And the three of you are well connected in your communities to a variety of beneficial resources to folks on the call. So if there's something that you think would be helpful to folks, just go ahead and drop it, excuse me, in chat. Baron, when we were connecting in terms of having a conversation about sort of the different pieces of you, right, shared that the LGBTQ plus community was an important piece for you. Are there special qualities or environments that a third place can create or does create to make it welcoming to members of the LGBTQ plus community?
The,
Okay.
the environments are such that I've discovered that as I am now in Ann Arbor, where I was once in my life, in Boulder, Colorado, where I've been in the Bay Area of California, where I've been in Washington, D.C., there seems to be something about academic or university-based communities that really lend themselves well to what I'm going to call a broader view, a broader lifespan of what is possible and what is innovative. So I think in a setting environment, that's where I found, not that other areas haven't provided it, just maybe to a lesser degree. Now, in terms of the qualities or characteristics, I think certainly this notion around evident, non-discriminatory practices, signage, symbolism, which really can declare openness and welcomeness, as can the absence thereof describe certain attitudes. I think engaging with people that clearly have a cultural but passionate interest in engaging and learning about each other as compared to the me, but you don't really matter. I think that's a very strong, what I'll call quality ethos that I see the LGBTQ community lives and has for years and continues to grow on. And I think also then that just this notion of how do we talk to one another? How do we reference scenarios and people, things in our lives? The use of verbiage, the way that whole package of, to me, qualities say that is either for and supportive of LGBTQ or not so much.
It's also important to note that when it comes to planning and solo aging, the TQ plus community has been real examples for chosen family planning, for the idea of intentional planning, that those of us who are looking at it in a larger, wider perspective for solo aging under a larger umbrella can glean and learn so much. And I think that it's important for that to be mentioned as well. Michael, there's some things about people have asked about inexpensive or micro ways of engaging in community and with third places. Are there things like the community garden or something like that that can ease someone who feels it's out of their comfort zone to engage in what they feel to be an established group or a group where other people know each other? Can you think of some ways where people can, I know you mentioned the whole concept of being a regular, right? Working towards being a regular. Do you want to say more about that?
Sure, I'd like to. Yes, I have a friend, Linda, who is also a gardener friend, and she is recently solo aging, separated from her husband. She goes to a restaurant right down the street from me, and she sits at the countertop. And she told me very specifically the other day that she feels like a teenager again because it's like a Woolworth countertop. And she gets to know the staff. And she says she's comfortable doing this because she lives alone. And just running into, we like to get smoothies. They have Smoothie King. They have really good discounts on certain days. So we'll meet up and go there. We'll run into people that we know, and it's grown. And we hang out during the winter months, not just in the summer months. We've become good friends. We go to the movies. There's so many options. I do realize I'm lucky to live in an urban area, and people have mentioned transportation. We offer free rides for people over the age of 65 in the city, regardless of income. So it is outstanding to be part of a city that really champions older adults. And I will say it makes it so easy. We have 2 hospitals within the neighborhood to get to a doctor. So I cannot imagine aging and having to drive 2 hours. Like, I think it was you, Margot, that said that. As I am a gerontologist, and I do feel that access to medical care should be at the top of everyone's list.
Yes.
So I'm a real champion of finding that transportation to get to your doctor.
The whole concept of needing to be able to be signed out of a colonoscopy and everyone's shaking their head. And the notion that if you don't have access to someone during the day, someone who can take off work or isn't working outside of the home, is available during the day, not solely specific to solos, but definitely impacting solos more frequently, then one may choose not to have that procedure, right? Not to have that screening procedure, and what the health outcome can be as a result of that. And it's not a good one. So you would think those are some sort of low-hanging fruit barriers that we in 2026 could figure out, regardless of what community people need to access that in. If they've driven for 2 hours, they definitely need to. So all of those pieces. So there are a lot of good comments going on in the chat. I think that's great. We'll do a few more questions and then we'll open it up for larger discussion. So when we look at everyday spaces, sometimes that it can be a great thing for those to turn into long-term anchors, right? That, like you said, in support of a health event or a crisis or a celebration, right? It doesn't always have to be on the crisis end, right? I always talk about solo aging as being, it's not a crisis to be solved, but a reality to be supported. And that the whole continuum, people to celebrate, happy with whatever happy looks like for you that day and whatever joy looks like for you, as well as the more complicated things of who do I call at 3 a.m. when funky things seem to happen, particularly at 2 and 3 a.m. Baron, are there particular things that, in terms of the 3-legged stool model and other pieces that you've learned about by moving to different places, that have given you some insight into where to tap into maybe solo agers or folks you might find have an affinity in the way they're planning their lives, living their lives, volunteering, all of those different kinds of things?
I found it probably in the more general sense by doing that initial outreach and sort of self-analysis, if you will, of what is important, what matters, because it's a personal ethos that I carry. So my personal ethos is doing well by doing good. And so if I can continue to do well in places that I have a passion for, then in turn, so can I ultimately deliver good potentially to others. And so when I think about how that gets translated into the real world communities and third places, it's oftentimes through discovering that, no, I'm not the only person that thinks that way. We just haven't found each other yet. And so I need to sometimes do my small bit to take that step or two forward and then find that there's others clearly there. And we all want to join each other in bringing this to a greater good. And so that to me is the way that I package it, is that being clear, I call it the inside out mirror, starting with the mirror looking inside to see who I see and what I know, then reversing the mirror and looking outside to see what's out there and how then do we blend the mirror views in a more unified sense.
That's fabulous. That's another good one. You might be asked to repeat that as well. In the 11 or so places, did you find that there were commonalities in, culture may be different, language may be different, but in the places that you've called home for whatever period of time, are there commonalities in terms of when you look at your 3-legged stool or when you do that reflection exercise, in terms of things that go across the miles?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward, and nobody on this panel will disagree, I'm sure. We all have a need to be needed. And so to the extent that you say, I do, so should I then appreciate others do as well. And so I think to the extent that there's cultural mores, that there are geographic differences, that there are age differences, whatever might be intervening factors in the places I've lived, the common thread is always we all have a need to be recognized, and we all have a need to be appreciated. And to find what that means for you, which also begs the second part, I need to be able to ask you. I have to solicit from you what that means for you. As compared to back what I said a moment ago, it's me.
That mutual piece is also a great way to start conversations with people for whom you might be hesitant, right? You're not going to
Mhm.
walk up to someone and say, "Can I call you at 3 a.m.?" Right? But you may say, I'm new to this book club and I'm trying to figure out if I can't come or if I have questions, and who are there people I can call afterward? Then how did you do that? Learning from other people. And that mutual piece is really important. I also want to note that there are a number of people who I've gotten a lot of feedback in the last number of months. We did a solo aging survey. There'll be a white paper about it. But the whole concept of identifying as an introvert and sometimes participating in these conversations or these panels or workshops offered by different organizations, et cetera, where people take away the feeling that people are suggesting it's not okay to be an introvert. And the reality is, if anyone is thinking of taking that away from this conversation, please don't, because you are perfect the way you are. Sometimes stepping outside of our comfort zones because we all have the need to be needed and we are social creatures by creation. Humans are social, that there is a benefit in being connected to others, whatever that means for you. So I'm not suggesting everyone needs to suddenly switch their membership card from introvert to extrovert. But I don't want people also to think that it's a singular, linear, you're either an extrovert and you talk to everybody and it's so easy and blah, 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 or you identify as an introvert and anyone's judging you for that. It's also good to think about how we identify as introverts and what that really means, and extroverts and blah, blah, blah. That isn't this conversation, but I just wanted to make sure people didn't walk away with, they keep telling me I need to meet people. We're just offering resources and suggestions for people to be able to expand their networks as they want to. So that was just a quick PSA on the introvert feedback. Margot, for you, you shared that creating the North Coast and End of Life Collective really did expand your personal network and really created third places and other connections, possibly in an organic way that you weren't totally expecting. Can you say more about that? Do you want to say what the collective is? You're welcome to do that.
Yeah. So the North Coast EOL Collective was launched after the pandemic. And for me, just with my 35 plus year career in healthcare, community health, public health, and also on the front lines of the pandemic, both here in Oregon and I was running a large program in Hawaii, I was so profoundly impacted by how ill prepared we are as a community to navigate our mortality. And so it was this, our vision is a collective approach to death and dying, right? So, but you have to work backwards from that, because before we get to that place, we're still living life, and we're living life as a community. And this community is a collective effort. And so when the collective launched, it was really focused on the North Coast. And I've worked a lot of my career in this community, and I thought I knew it well. Know the data, know the players, the CEOs of the hospitals, worked in Oregon running some large health programs. But it wasn't until navigating this very profoundly personal experience and all that we were doing around that, with a priority on education, because in order for people to have agency, they have to have knowledge and information. It continued to expand. And so what happened is I started being invited to present to local community groups. And those groups evolved to, and it gets into the solo aging. One of the things that was really clear is we're considered a naturally occurring retirement community. So people
Ah,
move here, but then they want to age in place, knowing that there are limited resources. And there are some very isolated coastal communities. And so, how is it we come together collectively to support one another to age in place and prepare for end of life? So,
mm,
all this started compounding itself. And what happened is that I started being invited into these pockets of kind of this county that I thought I knew really well. And I realized I didn't know it nearly as well as I thought. And it was wonderfully humbling. And so, what it did was it gave me and offered me, and continues to this day, a very intimate view and relationship with these micro communities and
mhm.
how they identify with one another, what makes them and supports them feeling like this collective existence, these shared interests. And it's evolved into what we both shared, made me think of a 6-part series I co-facilitated back in May, and it was the Coastal Community Death Care series. And it was really informed by the community as a whole, like what they wanted, what they needed. Developed it. A lot of people participated, more than I would have expected. And one of the things that I talked about, and it's a term that actually comes from Maya Angelou, a children's book she wrote, and it's this term stranger friend. And then somebody else had said, we can care without having to be the caregiver. And so, how is it we exist in community as stranger friends and start to get comfortable with the uncomfortable? And this makes me think of those who are easily able to leave their homes, don't have
Mm,
access to transportation, have mobility issues, are solo agers. Some identify themselves, they say, I'm an orphan adult. Two, it's so hard to ask for help. Right.
Mm.
And so, this idea of how do we become better observers in our communities? And what does advocacy really mean? Right. There's
mm,
self advocacy and then advocacy for others. Right. We think of it
mhm.
often in the context of maybe an organization or certain rights or in a healthcare setting. But what does that look like within a community of stranger friends, of acquaintances? And how is it we can start showing up with one another because we care in that
Mhm.
collective kind of approach to community, but it doesn't obligate me to being the caregiver. And
Mm,
so I think those things, which at an intellectual level, I was like, yeah, I get. But having spent years now just immersed in these very intimate conversations with groups of people or just being contacted by an individual, it really has percolated up as so incredibly essential to how we navigate this solo aging as a community.
Before we shift to a larger community, Michael or Baron, do you have anything you want to add to Margot's extremely eloquent and fantastic vision and experience?
I would like to say one thing, Eileen. I have 5 chosen family members that are friends. I refer to them as my marble jar friends, only a limited amount. And I have an iPhone, and my phone will ring even if I have it on silent, if it's coming from them. I had a friend of mine who lives 2 blocks away call me the other day. I was going to bed early. My phone was off. He needed help getting out of his garage. The door was jammed. And so it came through. I was able to help him. But just people that I love, that I trust, that I want to be involved in their lives, that I do this for, as well as my parents. I have 5 friends that I keep always, and one might change, but only very close chosen family members.
Does each person have an assigned marble and an actual jar? Because it's a great metaphor if
Yeah.
it's not literal.
They do not, but that's a very good proposition that I will
Yeah,
consider.
that's a great, it's a great example. Baron, anything you want to add?
Not so much. I think I resonate with Margot and Michael's comments that you know what you know, and you know the peeps that you know, and then in turn, you know the communities that you know. And I say that in this sort of jargonist sort of way because You don't have to get me to try to ask those questions. So it's very innate to who I am as a human being, but I think that's innate in all people. We may not have just done the self-examination to really find it yet. And I think that's
Mm,
where the community engagement piece really comes into play is you can be anywhere with whomever you choose to be, virtually or in person. And mobility will play a role, and transportation will play a role. But you have the right, the chosen honor, to choose where you want to be. And I think Margo's point is a great one. I don't have to be your caretaker, but I can demonstrate a caring community for you.
absolutely. I think that's great. I thought we could go back into the larger screen gallery for a few minutes. I do have one final question for you guys as a wrap up, but as we get closer to the end, so I'm going to send us all back into the gallery. Yay for all the returners and welcome to all the new folks. I hope this is the first of many times you are joining us. I thought it would be a great opportunity for folks if like 3 or 4 either comments or questions. I know we all are navigating unique experiences. My experience is unique to me. But I hope that the notion that there are 160 of you still on the screen, on this Zoom, having this conversation, and over 400 people demonstrating interest in this specific conversation. I know it may not change today that you feel you don't have someone to reach out as an emergency contact or a 3 a.m. person or a ride to the grocery store. But I hope you see, back to Margot's point of being a supportive community, that there's opportunity to do. It's going to take time. It's going to take work. Navigating Solo is turning 5 in October. It is amazing to me how it has blossomed and grown, and that is all because of all of you. And while it may feel like you're typing that in today in the chat, my hope is that at a future program in a chat or an email to me or something, I've connected with someone who we're talking about being an emergency contact. Marguerite?
I have been scribbling notes and I received so much great information for each one of the guest speakers today. You really helped me identify where I'm at and ways to develop those relationships. I'm currently caregiver for my mother, and she needs a lot of help, especially that techie stuff. I'm pretty good at it. I taught at a university for over 20 years before I moved here, moved out of state. And I'm a lifelong learner. So it just broke my heart being out of state when she didn't know how to figure something out on the computer or the phone. So here, there's something every day, right? You got to change a password. I went to the library and I take classes there with the computer stuff, even if it's stuff I know, and I still learn stuff, but it breaks my heart. I'm getting to a question here. It breaks my heart when I see other people going, and I tell the teacher, can I assist? Because I'm already moving along. And my friends were not tech savvy. So I'm wondering if anybody has an idea for how I could possibly create something in this new community where I'm cultivating friends. I got one really close friend. Would you have any suggestions for how I can synthesize my experiences and my passion for the meditation and that to create a community with that in a new place?
So that's a really big question. And I think that's a whole conversation outside of this to allow other people to ask questions. But it's a really important one. And it's really, how do you synthesize all the different parts of your interests and your attributes, your career experience, and what calls you, to get back to what Baron was referring to. And so that's all I can say is acknowledge that right now, because it's a big question. You're talking about really a logistical kind of strategic plan for how to move forward with that. But what I would recommend is identifying your top couple primary interests and networking with those communities and having those conversations, because people have interesting ways of putting to kind of weaving together their eclectic talents and figuring out what that will look like in a new offering to a community. So I'm going to leave it at that and to make room for Ailene to be able to respond to some other questions.
Collaborations. That sounds great.
Great. Thank you to both of you. I will just give my soapbox speech on people adapting to technology. I am fortunate to have a niece and a nephew. I always joke that even though my nephew, when he was 3, could pull up things on the DVR, and when my niece was 6 months old and swiping on the iPhone because it was fun, I reminded people that neither one of those awesome children took a class in utero on how to do that. There was not something offered especially in my sister-in-law's womb, but the fact that this was part of their development as soon as they arrived on the planet makes it a lot different than those of us who are catching up and adapting to that being a part. And I often hope that's the approach people take in engaging people with new technology. It came to me in my 40s, right? It came to other people in their 60s. You had a whole year. That's a whole amount of time to not know how to swipe or zoom in or whatever. So that's my soapbox. But hopefully people, when they are teaching older adults and engaging people in navigating technology, hopefully come at it with that kind of perspective.
I agree completely that virtual world is actually wonderful for fostering connections, especially for people who may have transportation issues or other issues and so forth. And I did put in the chat earlier on, I'm looking for people with whom to speak French. So I did speak French. I usually go to Paris once a year, and I take a lot of classes through Alliance Française. It's all across the United States, and it gives me great joy. It's a special interest I have. And through taking these classes, I've made some very good friends, and we get together virtually once a week to speak French. And we're talking about meeting each other as well. So I feel a connectedness with these groups, take them with the same students, depending upon where the Alliance Française is, might be. And we've really gotten to know each other. The other thing I wanted to mention, 2 things real quickly. 55 plus communities. I just sold home a year ago in a 55 plus, and I'm looking for another one. And they may not be for everyone, but I find it's a wonderful way for people to make connections. And their activities, you don't have to take part in. You can take part in as many activities as you want. And also, the community I had been in had a group called Pay It Forward. And this is a group where if you needed someone to go with you to a colonoscopy, for example, you just let them know, and they had volunteers, and then you pay it forward by being a volunteer and doing that as well. So I think that some of these 55 plus communities are excellent for fostering communication and connection and someone to be there when you need it. The other thing, real quickly, I would mention would be online groups in terms of making connections. Perhaps in my alumni group, I have 2 alumni groups in North Carolina that I do things with. And so that might be another way to make connections.
Right. People often also throughout this have mentioned lifelong learning. If you ever wondered if you were a lifelong learner, the answer is yes, because you're on this conversation. So if you didn't think of yourself beforehand as a lifelong learner, congratulations, you're a lifelong learner. The OLLI programs or other programs that may be connected to community centers, libraries, universities, and colleges are some great ways also to connect with some lifelong learning, all different types of settings and communities. Is there one more comment or question? Okay. So I will, in the opportunity to wrap things up before we say a very hearty thank you to our panelists. I like when people have the opportunity to maybe think about some kind of action they can take. I don't use the word small because my small and your small are different smalls. So whenever I say small, I put it in quotes. But if there's, for each of the panelists, if there's a challenge or an actionable step that someone is looking to cultivate, something about a third place in the next week ish, what would be your suggestions?
We'll start off with a tactic, and that is by simply asking either friends, family, neighbors, coworkers, wherever might be your first and second places, a very simple question. What do you, when you think of qualities, what do you think are mine? If you had to name one or two qualities that you think I represent and I reflect on a daily basis, what are those? Then, if you're really feeling brave, add on the second question, which is, and where do you think that I could best use those in this community? And so I think giving that to, because it's more comfortable to do with friend, family, and neighbors than it is to a stranger. And then what you learn from that, you can then take in two different directions. You can then go explore it independently, or you can play in the virtual world of seeking ye shall find. And you should put in qualities of empathy, pet loving, and babysit, and see what comes back from that kind of research. So those things are very easily doable by just asking, what qualities do you see when you look at me?
Michael or Margot?
I would challenge people to reconnect with some old friends, maybe pick two people that you haven't heard from in 6 months. I recently reached out to a friend. I'm going to Great America for a private event in September to meet my friend, and I haven't talked to him in a long time. And we used to be very good friends, and just getting reacquainted and showing up for him and getting involved. So really strategize. Just think about some people that you haven't heard from. Yeah.
That's great. Margot?
Yeah, so I don't have a specific task. It's this idea of challenging ourselves to be a little bit more comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because I think it's that threshold that really can get in the way, and it can be a low threshold, it can be a high threshold. But to know, we know when we're uncomfortable, but then to just be with that and ask ourselves what that is. And I have just a quick anecdotal story about that, right? So my work has always been very public, but I'm actually an introvert by nature, and I've traveled solo since I was in my 20s. I don't even think most of the time when I do things to call someone and go do it. I just go do it. And I enjoy myself, but I do connect with people. I have conversations. But a couple of years ago, I realized I've spent my whole career caring for community, and I didn't know how to be with community, two different things. And so for my intention, this was a couple years ago, I'm quite physically active. I'm able to be still, and I love being outdoors. I thought, okay, I'm going to go to this one particular exercise class that's in the neighboring county south of here. So I have to drive and sign up and go to it in the mornings. And it wasn't so much because I get plenty of exercise, but it was the connection to community. And I didn't really know anyone. I knew faces. They knew me through the collective, but they weren't part of my social network. And I didn't really like the music, but I just kept going. And do you know what? I'm still going 2 years later because it's like I don't even hang out with most of the people, but we've gotten to know one another. And I realized, oh, this is now part of my community. And I'm an out of district now member of the North Coast Rec District, and it's led to other things because as things do, one thing leads to another. But I just remember going, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do this. But I just kept going because that was my commitment for the year to learn, remind myself what it is to be in community again, not just to serve community. And now I am with that community, and I feel like often I'm in a Prairie Home Companion episode, but it's been really challenging and really good and really fun, and I'm no longer uncomfortable.
That's great. Have they changed up the music, or are you still tolerating
Yeah,
the
actually,
music?
it's pretty good this morning.
Okay, good. So that's from around.
the 80s,
Gotcha.
but it's still really fun, and it's people of all ages and who are committed to trying to do what they can to age well, right? From physical exercise.
I just have one quick kind of credo that I want to share with all of our participants. It's one that I've lived by for years, and I think it's very reflective of this evening's topic and conversation. The past is in your head, the future is in your hands. And I really hold true to that because I've got to get out of my own head sometimes to do the things that I choose to do that I can do.
So it makes us remarkably human, right?
Absolutely.
Yes, getting out of our own heads. I am so appreciative to our three panelists. I will say a formal thank you in a second. I wanted to share with you a resource you may not know, or a day you may not know exists, even though it's existed since the Carter administration. September 28th is National Good Neighbor Day. And it is the kind of thing where there's really just opportunity. Sometimes people live in apartment buildings or condo buildings, and they don't know the person who lives across from them or next to them or below them, or et cetera. And people in neighborhoods don't know the person on either side, et cetera. And there's a national organization that has taken on National Good Neighbor Day. And I saw it a couple of years ago, and I've promoted it and whatever, but I felt there was a gap in the resources offered, talking about different kinds of home constructs, families, et cetera. And so I met with the head of the program last week, and she was very kind to invite Navigating Solo to be a partner in it. And so what I dropped in chat on our Navigating Solo website are two different resources. And if you go to community, it'll be at the end of the drop down on the website. There is a 2-page ideas for engaging with our neighbors. And the second page has 3 blank cards, wide cards, that you can fill out yourself and say, my name is this, I'm interested in this kind of hobby, or I want to speak French with other people, or whatever, or I'm updating my emergency contacts. Are you open to being, etc.? So that's a resource. And just for some fun in exercising our brain synapses, I also created a word search. And there's a solution key on the second page. And it's solo aging focused with neighbor focus. So it may feel a little silly and whatever, but it might be also a way to engage with other people. It's also a great already existing event that has a toolkit already online through their national website, that has neighbor bingo cards, that has all different kinds of resources. Like I said, templates, ideas for gatherings, for libraries, for businesses, for individuals, for neighbor organizations, etc. And it might be an opportunity in the next month to take this conversation and apply it to maybe something different within your own community. So I just wanted to mention that to you. I will send out a reminder as it gets closer, of course. But I'm thrilled that we're partnering with them because I think it's really lovely. They uploaded the solo aging resources today. And so that's now part of this national conversation. So I think that's really great because representation matters. So with that, I want to say a huge thank you to every one of you who registered, who joined us, who participated, who typed in chat, and of course to Baron, to Margot, and to Michael for spending the time, the preparation, and the time with us to share your experiences, which I know just offered so much to our community. So thank you. Our panelists are going to stay on for a quick debriefing, but the rest of you, I hope you have a fantastic rest of the afternoon or evening, and hopefully we will see each other again very soon.
Ailene, I didn't mean to interrupt, but Ruth Ellen has her hand up.
I just want to say in general,
to Margot's point about being an introvert, I can't believe I'm the same person I was 50 years ago. I moved to a place I didn't know anyone because it was my sweet spot. I could have been nearer to siblings, but it was too expensive, too cold. Going out, like you said, finding your people, do the things you love. Find the things you love, like Miriam was saying. And the other thing, don't be afraid to be a little vulnerable. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I talk to people. They're saying in the news, you can bring up your serotonin level by smiling at somebody in the grocery store. It'll make you feel better, even if you don't talk to anybody else. And because I did that, I met a woman who almost seems like my soulmate because we were there to talk to each other or listen to each other at the checkout at the CVS. So you really never know where that connection is going to come from. So I'm glad
That
to
is
meet all of you.
excellent. Thank you for that. Not only does it raise your serotonin, but it also raises it on the other end, gives a kick of dopamine that somebody sees you. Really important. Those kinds of things and lifting each other up is great. And I'm glad that we made sure your comment and experience was included. When you log off of Zoom, there will be a survey. It's really just to get some feedback to inform future conversations. And it also gives you the opportunity that if you'd like to be a panelist on one of our table talks, feel free to share that as well on a topic and all of that. So with that, I am definitely going to say have a very good rest of the day, whatever that looks like for you. And hopefully we will be connected again soon. Thank you.